Aside from the astounding impact that Orson has had on the theater and motion pictures and I suppose almost all forms of show business, he is completely and absolutely responsible for aiding, abetting, and encouraging some of us to become actors. He has a lot to answer for.
By any measure, Orson Welles was a man of boundless gifts. A magician in youth, a theatre prodigy in his 20s, the enfant terrible of radio, and the cinematic visionary who, at just 25, wrote, directed and starred in Citizen Kane, a film frequently named the greatest ever made. Yet for all the accolades, Welles's career was a chaotic symphony of unfinished projects, fractured relationships, and lingering scandals. He was lionized and vilified in equal measure and often simultaneously. His story is not merely one of genius, but of a genius who continually collided with the systems around him, deliberately, defiantly, and sometimes self-destructively. "I started at the top and have been making my way down ever since," Welles quipped in a 1960s interview with characteristic irony. But the truth is more complicated. For every triumph, there was a feud. For every masterpiece, a mutilation. And for every moment of clarity, a trail of confusion left in his wake. Welles's first major brush with controversy came not from the silver screen, but over the wireless. On the evening of October the 30th, in 1938, his Mercury Theatre on the Air broadcast an adaptation of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds.
That little music playing and then an announcer coming on and saying, "Excuse me, we interrupt this program to bring you an announcement from Jersey City. Jersey City has just fallen. Take you."
What distinguished it was its format, a series of live news bulletins interrupting a concert program purporting to report a Martian invasion in real time.
"What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right."
Despite a disclaimer at the program's outset, many listeners, missing the introduction or swept up in the realism, believed the broadcast to be genuine. Reports of panic, though later exaggerated, included people fleeing cities, jamming emergency phone lines, and preparing for the end. Welles, then only 23, found himself on the front pages of every newspaper in America. "It's all too terrifying. I'm terribly sorry," he told reporters the following morning, trying to appear contrite. But the stunt, whether prank, experiment, or unintentional furore, made him a national celebrity overnight. It also marked the beginning of his fraught relationship with the media, authority, and truth itself.
We wanted people to understand that they shouldn't take any opinion predigested, and they shouldn't swallow everything that...
In 1941, Welles made his feature film debut with Citizen Kane, a fictionalized account of a powerful media tycoon whose rise and fall is told in fragments, flashbacks, and fractured perspectives.
Citizen Kane is a modern American story about a man called Kane, Charles Foster Kane. I don't know how to tell you about him. There's so many things to say.
The film was groundbreaking in its visual style, narrative structure, and psychological complexity. But its inspiration, thinly veiled, was William Randolph Hearst, the real-life newspaper magnate with a fierce grip on American journalism and politics. Hearst's reaction was apoplectic. He banned mention of the film in his vast media empire, attempted to suppress its release, and allegedly threatened to expose Welles's personal life to discredit him.
There was indeed a very definite effort to stop the film during shooting by those elements in the studio who were attempting to seize power, because in those days, studio politics, particularly RKO and indeed many of the big studios in Hollywood, were very much like Central American republics. And there were revolutions and counter-revolutions and every sort of palace intrigue, and there was a big effort to overthrow the then head of the studio.
Gossip columnist Luella Parsons reportedly told RKO executives, "If that film is released, I'll destroy him." Welles stood his ground, refusing to apologize or alter the film. "If Hearst isn't like Kane, I didn't do a good job of disguising him," he later said, half smirking. The damage, however, was done. Despite critical praise, Kane underperformed at the box office, and Wells's reputation in Hollywood began its slow decline. Decades later, Pauline Kael would assert in Raising Cain that Wells didn't write the screenplay, a claim since debunked, but emblematic of the continuing controversy surrounding the film and its creator. The myth of Citizen Kane grew, but so did the distance between Wells and the industry that once embraced him. Wells's follow-up, The Magnificent Ambersons, was adapted from Booth Tarkington's Pulitzer-winning novel and filmed with the same experimental flair as Kane. But during post-production, Wells was dispatched to Brazil as part of a wartime goodwill effort funded by the US government. While he was abroad, RKO executives took the opportunity to recut the film, slashing over 40 minutes and reshooting its ending for a more upbeat tone. The original footage is believed to be lost forever.
You'll never see that part of the film. These stills are all that remain of 3 or 4 missing reels. The film was cut by the studio in Wells' absence. At least 45 minutes of his version has totally disappeared.
They destroyed Ambersons, and it broke my heart, Wells later told Peter Bogdanovich. It was the only time in my life that I really felt awful about being in movies. This moment became symbolic of the perennial battle between Wells and the studios. He was a visionary, but one whose vision rarely aligned with the commercial or cultural expectations of his backers. Ambersons was a critical success in its truncated form, but a commercial failure, and its disfigurement was a blow from which Wells never fully recovered.
That it was too downbeat, famous Hollywood word at the time, downbeat. So it was all taken out, but it was the purpose of the movie.
The late 1940s and early 1950s were a time of deep paranoia in the United States. The House Un-American Activities Committee, emboldened by Cold War tensions, began investigating alleged communist sympathizers in Hollywood. Wells, a progressive who had campaigned for racial equality, championed anti-fascist causes, and spoken openly against totalitarianism, found himself under suspicion. He was never formally blacklisted, but FBI files revealed years later that J. Edgar Hoover had monitored him extensively. In 1947, columnist Walter Winchell hinted that Wells might be a communist. The cumulative effect was a gradual estrangement from Hollywood. In 1948, he left America for Europe, living for extended periods in Italy, France, and Spain.
And I believe that they will find what is true and inevitable from what I've said. We'll photograph that and go on to the next moment. We're going to make the picture as though it were a documentary. The actors are going to be improvising.
I prefer the old Europe, he told an interviewer. In America, they hate you for being different. In Europe, they expect you to be. His self-imposed exile was also a necessity. Hollywood had grown wary of his demands and delays. Funding dried up. He became, in the words of writer Gore Vidal, a man with a movie camera wandering the world, looking for money and meaning. Perhaps no Wellesian project better encapsulates his later life frustrations than The Other Side of the Wind.
The man is infested with disciples. I'm the apostle.
Just like me and God. How could you tell us apart?
Shot intermittently between 1970 and 1976, the film was intended as a savage satire of Hollywood decadence, aging auteurs, and the incoherence of modern art cinema. But its production was mired in chaos. Funding came in part from Mehdi Bushiri, brother-in-law to the Shah of Iran. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the rights became entangled in legal disputes, effectively trapping the film in limbo. Wells, unable to edit or release it, grew increasingly bitter. It's all tied up with lawyers. I don't own it. I don't control it. I just made it, he told Henry Jaglom in a series of lunch tapes now immortalized in My Lunches with Orson. The film remained unreleased until 2018, 33 years after Wells's death, when a team led by producer Frank Marshall and director Peter Bogdanovich completed it using Wells's notes. Its release prompted a wave of reassessment, with critics marvelling at its formal audacity and prophetic themes.
Last night I journeyed backwards in time to the medieval world of Dark Tower. In this amazing game, I had to find 3 keys.
In later life, Wells's financial woes forced him into a realm he had once mocked: advertising.
Generally true, the one generalization which is true about America is that everything is true about it. Yeah. It's impossible to say anything that isn't true, good or bad. Our enemies are right, our friends are right.
He lent his unmistakable baritone to campaigns for Paul Masson wine, We Will Sell No Wine Before Its Time, and other brands, including frozen peas. One recording session, now infamous, was leaked in the 1980s and featured Wells berating a director in despair over the script's wording. "You don't know what I'm up against," he snarled. "It's impossible." The outburst, played for laughs in later decades, underscored a deeper truth. Wells, the artist, had been reduced to Wells, the pitchman. He did the work to finance his films, but it became a symbol of his fall from grace in the eyes of the public. When asked about it, he shrugged. "I hate it, but I do it to eat. I'd rather sell wine than my soul." In 1973, Wells released F for Fake, a film that defied categorization.
Ladies and gentlemen, by way of introduction, this is a film about trickery and fraud, about lies.
Ostensibly a documentary about art forger Elmire de Horry and hoax biographer Clifford Irving, it quickly morphs into a self-reflexive essay on authorship, illusion, and truth. The film deliberately misleads the audience, revealing late in the piece that much of what has been presented as fact is, in fact, invention. Critics were baffled. Some found it brilliant, others incoherent. Roger Ebert called it a demonstration of filmmaking as sleight of hand. Wells, ever the magician, delighted in the ambiguity. "I don't regard truth as the main thing in a documentary," he said. "I think the moment a man makes a film, he imposes his point of view." It was perhaps his most personal statement, a defense of the art of illusion, a lament for a career marred by betrayal, and a sly confession from a master trickster. Wells died in 1985, slumped over his typewriter, reportedly working until the end.
Orson Welles was an original, but just hours after Brenner's death was announced today, Orson Welles died of a heart attack at his Hollywood home. He was 70 years old. Connie Collins takes a look at this boy wonder who never quite fulfilled his great promise.
In the years since, his reputation has only grown. New restorations, rediscovered footage, and posthumous releases have prompted a re-evaluation of his later work. Yet the controversies remain part of the legend. He was, in the words of Martin Scorsese, a magician who couldn't stop pulling rabbits out of hats, even when no one was watching. For Scorsese and countless others, Wells was not simply a filmmaker, but a symbol of what film could be: provocative, poetic, and perpetually unfinished. Peter Bogdanovich once asked him whether he still saw himself as a great director. Wells replied, "I've always thought of myself as a writer-director. The writing's the easy part." And yet, what Orson Welles wrote, on celluloid, on stage, over the airwaves, was never simple. It was always in conflict, with the world, with the form, and often with itself. He lived on the edge of controversy, not because he sought scandal, but because he refused compromise. In that refusal lies both his tragedy and his enduring brilliance.